All right, in this video, we're going to go through looping. So here is another very common structure and a common activity that you're going to do in your programming. We're going to start out with the ForIn loop, which you should have just seen in the presentation. And the ForIn loop is sort of the easiest way to iterate through various data structures and just do a calculation over and over again until something becomes true or you move outside a range. That's up to how you program it and your needs. What we're going to do is just use the range for now to see sort of the basics on how we can use this. And then once we get into arrays and dictionaries and some other data structures, we'll come back and revisit the ForIn loop to see how it works with those data structures. So what we want to do to start with is if we're going to iterate, let's say we want to print out hello world 10 times. So how would you do that? First of all, what you don't want to do is this, right? Hello world, and then copy this 10 times. That is not what we want to do. What we want to do is use the power of the computer and the for looping structure to do that for us. So what we can do is, let's just move this down out of the way for a minute, is we can use what's called a ForIn. So we type in FOR for the start of the for loop. Now here it's looking for a variable name. A variable name is a variable that we can use inside our for loop, but only inside. So a lot of times if I'm just going through a set of numbers, let's say from 1 to 10, I could say I as my variable name, I for index. You can use whatever name you want. I'll just use I here for now. And then you're going to say in. That's the key word. So you have for with a variable name and then in, and then what you want to supply here is a range. And this is a range of values. So if I'm saying 1 to 10, and I'm including the 1 and including the 10 as a part of that loop, I would do 1, and then I typically will do a space here, that's optional, ... space 10. Now when you do this, those 3 dots mean that you are starting at 1 and you are actually including the value 10 in the loop. If I did ... less than, then what this is saying is you start at 1, you go up to, but you don't include 10. So it would then be 9. So that would be a loop from 1 to 9. But we said that we were going to do 1 to 10. So let's make this an inclusive range. And then we're going to, just like we did our if statement, we're going to do an open left bracket, hit enter to get that closed right bracket to go with it. And we have now created a for loop. So it looks very similar to like the if statement, right? But what's important here is this is going to run 10 times. It's going to start with the value 1 and it's going to go up to 10. And we can prove this by, let's copy this or move this line here. And then we'll go ahead and run. We will discuss this warning in a second. But if I look down here, I see that I got hello world and it printed 10 times. If we wanted to count them out, you'd see there's 10. So this is an example of iterating over something. Now, one of the warnings here, it's saying, hey, this value I was never used. And that's because we didn't use it in our code here at all. And when that is the case, and sometimes that's reasonable, like in this right here, we don't really need the variable I. To get rid of that, we can backspace and put an underbar. An underbar is just a placeholder for where a variable might go, but it's showing the coder and the compiler that we really don't need a variable. So what this is doing is going to iterate from 1 to 10, but it's not going to put the value in I. So again, if I were to rerun this, the behavior is exactly the same, but I don't have that warning. But let's suppose that I was going to use I. Maybe I want to actually print out the value of I here. So it's going to print 1 to 10. I could do it this way, print I, and then I is now, notice we don't have a warning anymore because we're actually using I. I can do Command R, and now I get my values from 1 to 10. Now, a couple other quick things. Let's just see, for example, if I did the less than, so this is the other type of range, and I do Command R, I should get 1 to 9, and sure enough, I did. I got 1 to 9. Now, another thing we can do is we can add, and we can do any kind of math or anything we want inside the for loop. So for example, I could create a var out here called sum, and we'll give it an initial value of 0. So remember that we didn't give it a type, but it inferred the type from here. So it's inferring an int. So sum is an int, and it's starting out with a value of 0. And then let's say every time we loop through here, I want to add the value of I to the sum. So one way to do that would be to say sum equals sum plus I. So that would increment the value of sum by whatever I is. So sum would start out at 1. Then, since I goes to 2, sum would become 3. 3 plus 2 is 5, and so forth. So we would see sum increasing. So we could print that out. We could say, let's take this, put this here, and put sum there, and let's run this and see what we get. So here we see we had 1, 3, then we got 6, we got 10, 15. So it was adding whatever the value of I was to sum, and sum just keeps taking on that new value. Now, if you remember from a previous video, we talked about the other way of doing this, which was sort of like syntactic sugar. I could say plus equals I, and that also is the same thing. And again, you can use whichever method you think is clearer for you to understand your code. But you can see down here that we got the same results. Now, the other thing that's interesting is there is, which I didn't do in the slides, but I'll just present it here since we're into the for loop, is you might want to exit this loop early. And what I mean by that is you're going through this loop, and you are always going to go through it 10 times or 9 times. Let's put this back to that. So now it's going to be 10 times, right? And what if, though, I said, you know, if the sum, let's say, exceeds 28, I want to exit. I want to bail out of this for loop. There's a way to do that. Well, first of all, we said if the sum is greater than 28. Well, we know how to do that, right? That's a control flow. That's an if statement. So I'm going to put that if statement right here. I'm going to say if sum is greater than 28, and then I'm going to do that open bracket, close bracket. And now I'm going to do something here, right? So, well, what can I do to tell the system I want to finish this for loop? I can just say break. So now when we run this, we should be breaking once sum is greater than 28. So that means that I will probably see up to this 36, but after that, I shouldn't see 45 and 55. So let's go ahead and run it and see if that's what happens. So we're running along, and sure enough, we have exited after the value 36 was presented. And that's because this is a point at where sum became greater than 28. The other thing you can do is remember to use the debugger. If I wanted to watch this all happen and step through it slowly, I can do that. So I could put a breakpoint right here, for example. Now I've hit my breakpoint at line 6, and if I put my cursor over sum, I see that sum is a 1. By the way, I can put my cursor over I, and I see I is a 1. And sum started out at 0, but 0 adding I or 1 to it means that sum is now a 1. Now, if I were to just run it, instead of stepping, this is going to run as much as it can. It's going to come around again in the loop, and it's going to break again. So let's run it again. Okay, so now we've hit the breakpoint a second time. And if I look at the value of sum, it says sum is 3. And that's because I is a 2, sum was 1 originally. Now we've added 2 to it, and we've gotten a 3. And we could put our breakpoint here instead. I just moved it up by holding down the left mouse button and dragging it up 1. And if we run again, now we're breaking here, so we can look at sum before and after. Sum is a 3, I is a 3, So that means that if I step over this statement, which I'm going to step over right here, I now should see 6. And if I put my cursor on it, sure enough, I see a 6. So this is the ForIn loop. And you'll use it all the time in your programming. So you're definitely going to want to learn it, play with it. The next time we visit this, we're going to see how for loops can iterate over various data structures, most predominantly over arrays.